Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Sunday, happy June. My mom, whenever June comes, my mom likes to sing, I'm not even sure what musical it's from. June is busting out all over. I have a song for every situation. I do my best to hold it in up here, but I could sing a song for every Sunday. No, I won't go any further with that. Okay. I want to talk today about our potential as God's children. So this was sparked by a podcast. I actually didn't listen to the podcast. I read the transcript for the podcast. I'm kind of a little weird like that. But I listened to read a podcast. And I want to share a couple of the stories from this podcast to kind of set up the main point and how that relates to our life and God. So the introductory story of this podcast has to do with lab rats. And there was an experiment where these scientists had these lab rats, ordinary, plain lab rats, and they split them into half. And they gave the first half to people who were going to put them through a maze. And they gave the second half to other people who would put them through the same maze. But they told the first group of people, this group of rats is highly intelligent, incredibly smart, like way above average. And then they gave the exact same, the same group of rats, the other half, they gave to the other group of people with a maze and said, these rats, they're like scraping the bottom of the barrel. They're really unintelligent, but, they'll do their best, I guess. So then these people who had these rats, who they thought of as either highly intelligent, gifted rats, or really, really dumb rats, they had to put them through the maze. And now the rats obviously have no idea what's being said about them. However, the rats who were spoken about as if they were highly intelligent way outperformed the rats who had been told that they were dumb. How is it possible? Because they don't understand the words, but somehow the people's perception of the rats that they had influenced them, whether it was with the body language they used around them, or the way that they held them, or the tone of voice that they spoke to them with, or the energy that they projected to them. Somehow, the highly intelligently labeled group of average lab rats did incredibly well as they went through the maze. And the ones that had been labeled as dumb really, really struggled. So, I'll let you sit with that for a second. What can we infer from this story? You don't have to say anything. Just think about it. So this story was actually just the teaser for the real story of this podcast. And the real story of this podcast was about a boy named Daniel, who at 7 months old had eye cancer and had to have his first eye removed. When he was 13 months old, he had his second eye removed. He has no memories of ever seeing. However, he can do almost everything that a seeing person can do with SONAR, essentially. Clicks, yep. And he's people, they call him the Batman, because he uses like echolocation, But he does things that people would never think would be possible for a blind man to do. He goes hiking by himself in places that he's never been to before. He rides his bike down streets, and it's like, I don't know how does this work, right? Our brains almost can't comprehend this as a possibility. But what happened was, when it turns out his mother had been in an abusive relationship with his father, eventually got the courage to leave him, and she made a commitment to herself that she would never live in fear or do things out of a motivation of fear. So although she had a small child, who in many cases people would be very fearful for, she determined that she would not let him live in fear. So she let him explore his world, and just naturally he learned that he could tell where objects were by making clicks and sensing where the sounds came back from. And he would do this in school, and the teachers would be like, that's weird, he's clicking all the time. And she'd be like, too bad for you. It works. And she bought him a bike when he was 6 years old, and he learned how to ride his bicycle. And parents would say, aren't you worried he's going to be hit by a car? And she's like, well, aren't all parents worried that their kids might be hit by a car? Yes, but that's not going to be a reason to not let him. If he wants to, and he can, then he will. They shared a story about how when he was 11 years old, he was in 6th grade, and another boy who was also 11 came to his school, who was also blind. But this boy had gone to a school for the blind up until that point. And he had to be led from his desk to the lunchroom, to his locker to get his backpack. And Daniel was so embarrassed by him. He didn't want to be he realized that's what people associate as being blind is, and he didn't even want to be associated with that person or with the word blind. He actually tried to run away from it. But then he realized that actually he had something to offer to other people who are blind. And he realized actually most children, if they're left to their own, will automatically start clicking or clapping or stomping their feet to be able to find their way around. But unfortunately, it's discouraged by almost everyone around them, and they're hindered. So, can you see a connection between the lab rat story and Daniel's story? It has a little bit to do with what kind of expectations we have on others, or maybe ourselves, but also what kind of potential people have if we don't box people in, right? So I want to share a little video. This is like a little video about Daniel. You can see how it works and how he helps others, and then we will move on.
I'm Daniel Kish. I'm the president of World Access for the Blind. I lost my first eye at the age of 7 months and my second eye at the age of 13 months. Echolocation is actually very simple. The physics of echolocation is very simple and easy to understand. It's similar to vision in a lot of ways. You have energy, in this case acoustic energy instead of light energy, and the energy goes out from the individual. In our case, it's in the form of a tongue click. And then that energy bounces off of everything in the environment, all surfaces everywhere, and comes back to the listener. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to familiarize myself with the area by clicking and listening to the returning echoes, and also keeping track of where I go and where I come from. Now there's a structure here, a small one, or well, it's a pole. I see. So now it really does open up. Here's another pole. And this is probably a court. Yeah. So this would be a basketball court. And there would be the hoop. For us, it's all about freedom. Freedom to choose, freedom to be without conditions, without restrictions. And flash sonar is just one element of that, it's one component of that. Most blind people spend much of their time on someone's arm or holding someone's hand or being directed by others. You won't develop these skills under those conditions.
We know one thing, that somewhere on the other side over there is another building. Now, let's click to see what we hear on this side. Not so much, right? There's some things, but nothing as pronounced as a building. So, let's step out into the parking lot and let's try to stay alive, man. Keep me alive.
During the course of the workshop, we take a hands-off approach, so hands are off, no one touches him, no one guides him, no one leads him, no one tells him what to do or where to go. And that is how the navigation system of a blind person becomes repaired.
Let's go out, but not yet. Listen to traffic. When it's clear, then you can go, okay? There's another car. Listen. Go ahead and go. Cane out, cane in front of you, and use your click. Click, stop. Use your cane, short cane. You're getting close to a car. Use your short cane. I don't want your cane touching it. Thank you. Wow. His pace has picked up. You see that, Daniel?
It really has.
He's walking a lot faster now.
Yep.
Brian, thank you for keeping me alive.
In the podcast, it goes into the scientific details that these people, what is sight? We think that we're seeing things with our eyes, but actually what we understand with our eyes is only processed by our brain. And so when they study the brain waves and the visual cortex of Daniel and Brian and these other people, the brain lights up. The areas for color and brightness don't. But shapes, even density, texture, contour, this is a salad bowl. This is a tree. This is, I'm sure, even the face, I can recognize this person by the face. So what we think of as what's necessary for sight doesn't mean that somebody actually can't see without eyes. And it just blew my mind. So I really thought about how does this translate into our life and our relationship with God and our faith, our spiritual life. And I realized that we are so based in our experiences on this earth. We set our expectations and our thoughts and our understanding of reality based on what we have experienced to this point. And that's how most blind people operate as well, based on their experiences and what other people tell them is what's possible for their life. But it only takes one person. It's so funny that Daniel says he faces a lot of resistance because there's a verse in the Bible about the blind leading the blind. And how that's kind of a ridiculous thing, right? So like it's ingrained in us. But it only takes one person to open up a whole new world of possibilities. And I feel like that we need those different expectations in our life than the ones that we're used to. We need people like Jesus to tell us that with God all things are possible. We need people like true parents to show us what can be done in the human lifetime. We need God to speak life into us, to show us what's possible. The thing is, we have to fight against everything else in the world that tells us we're not, right? And then I was thinking that, this man is considered handicapped. But aren't we all? Maybe not physically, but aren't we all handicapped in one way or another? In our ability to love, our ability to forgive, our ability to believe, and our maybe our faith muscles aren't so developed. Right? We all have our own handicaps. But at the same time, we have to let go of our concept of what a handicap is. Because I think most of us, if we saw a blind person, we'd think, well, there's only so much this person can do. And I think that we think of ourselves the same way. I just don't have the ability. I'm spiritually handicapped. There's only so much that I can do. And I think that there's justification for that, right? Of course, like, I wouldn't expect a blind person to be able to navigate, down 14th Avenue without getting hit by a car. Doesn't mean it's not possible, but I have a hard time to believe that. Right? There's a reason to believe that. We have justification for our limitations. But also that's not the end, right? That's not everything. So human potential is actually astounding. I have a couple of quotes from the Divine Principle where True Father has said that, if humankind had not fallen, we would have unlimited potential. So, had it not been for the fall, the development of the intellectual capacity of our early human ancestors would have enabled them to reach the highest level of spiritual knowledge, thus naturally stimulating their knowledge of the material world to develop to a corresponding degree. Humankind would have reached the stars long ago and harnessed the full potential of the universe. Had Adam not fallen but attained the tree of life, all his descendants could also have attained the tree of life. They would have built the kingdom of heaven on earth. But Adam fell, and God blocked the path of the tree with a flaming sword. Ever since, despite the best efforts of fallen people to restore the ideal of creation, the tree of life has remained an unattainable dream. Burdened by the original sin, fallen people cannot complete the ideal of creation and become trees of life by their own efforts alone. For this ideal to be achieved, a man who has completed the ideal of creation must come to the earth as a tree of life. All of humanity must then be engrafted with him and become one with him. Jesus was the man who came as this tree of life. So this, whenever this line always stands out to me from the divine principle. I can always recall, like, if we could reach our full potential, there's no limits to what we can do. And it would be done with love, right? So I think that humanity tends to twist it a little bit. Say, well, we can use the earth or use people, or we can go really far by using others. But I think this perspective is, if we first of all reach the highest level of spiritual knowledge, right? Mature our heart first. Unite our viewpoint with God's viewpoint. With a spiritual knowledge, then we would have a true mastery of the universe and be able to harness who knows what's possible. This is so hopeful for me, because you look at the world today and I think there's so many problems, right? And they seem unsolvable, don't they, sometimes? You know, there's social problems, there's economic problems, there are environmental problems. There are scientists who give us, 80 years until Colorado's as dry as Arizona, and, or 200 years until half the species of the world go extinct. And I'm just like, what? We have problems, but we're looking based on our experience thus far of what's possible with them. This quote by True Father shows me, humankind could have reached the stars long ago, and I'm like, what kind of technology does that take? But when we unleash our potential, when we become fully united, like one with God in heart and mind, then we can manifest that in the world. And I don't think it takes millions of years. We can change things very quickly. So it sometimes feels like we'll never escape our problems, but I think that's not the case. And it amazes me that God believes in us so much. But we're reassured all the time. All throughout the Bible, God is affirming us, telling us that we're his children, right? Jesus is telling us all things are possible. And I think it's really hard for us to actually believe that. We like those words, but it's really hard for us to internalize them and to know them to be true in our core. But at the same time, God is absolute, eternal, and unchanging. And so that doesn't change for us. Even though we might feel stuck because of past experiences, what things that I've tried to do and I haven't been able to accomplish, that's how we see things from our viewpoint, right? Our little spot on the earth with our limited perspective. But God, from his omniscient, omnipresent self, can see our full potential. So I have this quote from Jesus. Truly I tell you, if you have faith, even as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible to you. I've heard this quote so many times, I'm like, well, yeah, but the mountain's not actually going to move. But at the same time, I do have so many experiences in my life where I did things that if you had told me that I would do those things prior, I would not have believed you. If you had told me that I was going to give birth to twins, I'd be like, nope. I didn't even entertain that thought. And I should have, because I have twins in I have like my great-great-grandmother had 2 sets of twins. Mike's cousins. Like, there's so many twins in my family, but I think I was like, I didn't even want to consider the possibility. It was too scary. But I did. If you had told me that I could do a kayak race across the state of Missouri, without sleep and not ever hardly getting out of the kayak, I would say that's impossible for me to do. Other humans might be able to do that. I can't do that. But then I find out, oh, this is possible. If you had told me that I would start a school, I hate education. I do not have good memories. I mean, I was good at school, but I didn't enjoy school. I would never have thought that I would ever have anything to do with it. But here I am, and I'm so inspired by what we're doing. So these are my little mountains, right? I'm growing my faith, and I'm seeing how it's not even that I'm special. We all have this incredible potential inside of us that God sees and believes in. The tricky part, this is the hard part. Impossibility becomes possible through stretching our limits and our growth. It's not just as simple as telling a mountain to jump and it jumps, right? We have to be able to grow. And in order to grow, we have to also be able to let go of some things. I think about, anyway, it's hard, if you want to grow your muscles, you have to break them a little bit, and that's how they grow stronger. In order to believe what's possible, we have to strengthen our minds. And in order to grow in our faith, we have to strengthen our faith. And it's the same as a muscle. Sometimes we have to experience a little bit of pain or difficulty along the way. But our problem is we label difficulty as something that we don't want to have anything to do with. I don't want to have a hard time. I don't want to experience pain. That's no fun. I don't want difficulty. But then I was thinking about, I have a new nephew. My nephew just turned 1 on May 31st. Some of you were here when he was born during our last spring refresh. And in 1 year, he went from this little bitty blob, right, who couldn't speak, couldn't even see past 10 inches, can't think, oh, I want to hold that. They don't have any motor function. Nothing. All they do is eat, sleep, poop, and cry. That's all they can do when they're first born. And within a year, children can often walk and speak and climb and grab things and put things in. They can feed themselves. They can. They develop their personality. They know what they want and they know how to get it. In 1 year. When was the last time you had such a productive year? Oh my goodness. Not since I turned 1. But that year is filled with such difficulty for a baby, right? That's why they cry so much. You can't blame a baby for crying. They don't know how to communicate, right? So they have to cry. They learn how to move their body from not being able to move their body at all to being able to sit and roll over and sit and crawl and walk. And in that process is so much frustration and falling down and bumping their heads as they sit up and they hit a chair or fall over and hit the corner of a coffee table. Every baby has done this hundreds and hundreds of times. But a baby doesn't see it as a failure, right? They're just trying until they get what they want. What if a baby fell down 5 times and was like, that's it. I'm just going to let you carry me around the rest of my life. But we, with all of our concepts and past experiences, see our limitations as a failure. Or I'm not able to. I won't be able to because I didn't. And I can't. So, thinking back to the lab rats, what was spoken about them, what people believed about them, became their reality. God speaks truth and life into us. God believes in us. And sometimes we think, well, maybe God used to believe in me, but maybe it's too late. Maybe I've messed up too many times. I just read an article about a lady who had the worst childhood. She was sexually abused by people in her family and people in her church. Eventually married a pastor, but it wasn't a healthy relationship. Felt very trapped. Eventually left, but she never lost sight of God. She always believed that God was with her, and she asked God for guidance. And now she's becoming a famous singer in New York City, and she loves to sing gospel songs. And she felt like 60 years of my life. She's 60. 60 years of my life are wasted, and those are supposed to be the prime years. But then she read an article that actually, for most people, 60 to 70 is their most productive decade of their life. And then 70 to 80. Yeah. So, so I think God believes in our potential our whole life. There's never a point where God's like, actually, never mind. No. But the question is, how much can we believe in those words that God speaks to us? Because we have to fight against our culture, we have to fight against our past experiences, we have to fight against the expectations and beliefs that other people have about us. But who do we want to choose? Right? So then the question is, how can I hear those words and not just understand them or think that they're nice words, but how can I really believe those words? In our school, the role of a guide or the teacher is to believe that each child who enters our doors is a genius. And that is like the one major role and responsibility. Because if we truly do, not just, oh, this is this person's kid, so, we'll see how that goes. But, every child will find a calling that will change the world. No, if the guide in their heart believes that each person is a genius, then everything that flows out of that guide and interacts with that child will manifest the genius of that child. It's like the lab rats, right? Those people who got the intelligent and gifted rats believed that they were intelligent and gifted rats and somehow made them intelligent and gifted rats. Whereas those poor average rats who went to the people who believed that they were the most dumb and ungifted and bottom of the barrel rats, those people believed that. And it manifested in that. So what do we believe about God's words about ourselves? There's so much here. When I finished reading this podcast, I thought I'm going to have to read this again, listen to it again, because there's so much here. And one of the main points that Daniel made was, as he's training other blind, as the blind is leading the blind, as he's training them, the other blind person that he's training often has a helper or a guardian or something observing and, with them. But so many times, right before they catch it, right before they learn something, that other person steps in. So he gave an example of there was a 5-year-old boy that he was training, and they were at a park, and there was a road, and so the boy is exploring, and he's picking up, okay, this is a tree, and figuring it out, and he's walking towards the road, and he gets to the sidewalk, and he takes another step, and he's like 3 feet away from the sidewalk, and then the guardian steps in and pulls him back. But Daniel's perspective is he only needed to go one more step to recognize where he was at and stop on his own. But this person took away that learning experience from him. So it's such a, there's so many levels to that. As a parent with my own children, how many times do I step in before they really catch it? But also, God is not the kind of parent who steps in and saves us before he needs to. So I think sometimes we have to trust that God is our loving parent, but he's also a wise parent. And so maybe if we're going through difficulty, or we feel like we might be at the end of our rope, there might be a little bit more rope left. God might be not trying to put us in difficult situations for the sake of difficulty, but because there's something there where if we can just go a little bit further, then we can catch what it is that God wants to give us or to show us, or what is the teachable moment there for us. I think many times we go through difficulties and then we blame God or we blame others because it was so hard and we didn't enjoy it. But if we can go all the way, I think that God is a wise and good parent who leads us on a path for a purpose. So let's continue to explore what God speaks to us, what God wants to teach to us, and discover that we have more potential than we might think that we do. So if we can have faith and not just say that we believe it, but really know it in our core, that it's true, then it has the power to transform our life. So I think, I've experienced this on little levels, and I think it's growing over time. But it's there for all of us, and we can continue to grow in not just our muscles, and not just our mind strength, but also grow in our faith. And our potential will open up. So we're all part of that. It's not like one person, there's a few of us in this room who are gifted and who will get it, right? Daniel says every person has the ability to echolocation. If we just closed our eyes for a week, we might start to figure it out ourselves, right? So in the same way, we all have this potential. It might manifest differently than the person sitting next to you. But we all have an incredible potential that God believes in. So the question is, can I believe it myself? So please join me in prayer. Heavenly Parent, good morning. Thank you so much for your unending love and kindness and patience with us as we're growing in our hearts, we're growing in our minds, and we're growing in our faith towards you, Heavenly Parent. We know that this world is far from what you imagined at creation, and we're sorry, but we know that you never gave up on your vision. You never gave up on building the kingdom of heaven, not only in heaven, but here on earth. And you are calling us to be a part of that. I pray that we can continue to look into your words, speak to you in our prayers, and find you in our life as we go on this journey, and that we can turn off the extraneous sounds of this world, the voices that say that we're not enough and that we can't and that we never will, and that we can tune in to hear your voice, which speaks truth and life to us and gives us a path through Jesus and through our true parents that has unlimited potential. Please be with us this week as we go out into our lives. I pray we can manifest your love more fully every day. And we want to offer this time to you. I pray this in my name, Michael and Adonia Hendrick, a Blessed Angel family. Amen and Aju. Okay, thank you, everybody.